Love is powerful. It can heal, inspire, and elevate us, but when misplaced, it can consume us, leaving us drained, confused, and far from ourselves. According to Stoic philosophers like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, emotional mastery is the path to inner peace. Love, while natural, must not come at the cost of your well-being or wisdom. In this video, we'll explore 4 red flags that may indicate you're loving the wrong person, based on ancient Stoic principles and modern emotional insight. These are not fleeting signs or minor annoyances. These are deep imbalances that Stoics would call misalignments with nature and reason, proof that you're not in harmony with yourself or the other person. Let's begin. Chapter 1. You feel emotionally drained more often than not. One of the clearest signs that you're in love with the wrong person is the consistent feeling of emotional exhaustion. According to Stoic thought, external events and people should not rob us of our inner tranquility. If a relationship constantly leaves you feeling anxious, second-guessing, or depleted, it violates this Stoic principle. Think about it. Do you frequently feel like you have to recover from your conversations with this person? Are their moods so unpredictable that you're always walking on eggshells? Do their needs override your own, again and again? Seneca reminds us, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. But in the wrong relationship, suffering becomes real. Not because of one dramatic event, but because of the cumulative weight of subtle, daily imbalances. A loving partner should add to your energy, not drain it. They should inspire calm, not chaos. Stoics taught that we should not be slaves to our emotions. Yet, in the wrong relationship, your emotional state becomes tethered to someone else's behavior. Their silence becomes your worry. Their anger becomes your shame. Their needs eclipse your own. This isn't love, it's attachment disguised as love. 2. You compromise your core values to keep the peace. A Stoic values virtue above all else, integrity, reason, courage, and wisdom. In a healthy relationship, your values are not only respected, they're encouraged and shared. But if you find yourself regularly betraying your own standards, beliefs, or identity just to maintain harmony, that's a major red flag. Ask yourself honestly, are you constantly shrinking to fit their expectations? Do you let things slide that you know, deep down, aren't right for you? Do you silence your voice, your truth, your boundaries, because you're afraid of conflict? Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "Know, first, who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." If love causes you to lose sight of who you are, it's not love, it's dependency. If you're molding yourself to be more tolerable, more likable, more acceptable to them, you've become a version of yourself that exists only in their shadow. Even worse, you might have started convincing yourself that this is normal. True love does not demand the erosion of the self. It does not ask you to trade authenticity for approval. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your thoughts are constantly shaped by fear, insecurity, or compromise, your soul loses its original color. And that's a cost too high. 3. Their presence brings more doubt than peace. Love should be a safe harbor, not a storm you're constantly trying to navigate. When you're with the wrong person, peace is replaced by persistent doubt about the relationship, about yourself, about your future. You may start questioning your worth because of how they treat you. You wonder if you're too much or not enough. You may even question your perception, because they're so good at dismissing your feelings. This kind of relationship is fertile ground for gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and what the Stoics might call irrational attachments. When you constantly have to seek reassurance or feel the need to chase moments of peace, you're not in a relationship, you're in a survival state. The Stoics emphasized that clarity comes from within. But the wrong person clouds your clarity. They introduce confusion where there should be confidence. You spend more time overthinking their texts, tone, and silences than enjoying your time together. Peace is not the absence of problems, it's the presence of understanding. If your relationship leaves you perpetually unsettled, constantly on edge, that's your inner wisdom speaking. A Stoic does not ignore signs from within. Neither should you. 4. Your growth feels threatening to them. In a healthy relationship, your growth is celebrated. In a toxic one, it's seen as a threat. The wrong person may discourage you from pursuing your goals, passions, or independence, not because they don't believe in you, but because your growth makes them feel small. Marcus Aurelius taught that we are born to improve ourselves, to live according to nature and reason. But when your partner feels insecure about your progress, when they subtly sabotage your efforts, discourage your ambitions, or downplay your achievements, they're not loving you, they're trying to contain you. Sometimes this shows up as jealousy. Other times it's masked as concern. They might say things like, "Are you sure that's realistic? You've changed. You don't make time for me anymore." But growth is not betrayal. It's alignment. If your pursuit of a better self creates distance, it's not because you've grown apart, it's because you've outgrown the version of yourself that kept the relationship afloat. Love is not meant to be a cage, no matter how comfortable. Stoicism teaches that the highest form of freedom is freedom of the mind and soul. If someone feels entitled to limit that out of fear, insecurity, or pride, they're not your partner. They are your jailer. And no matter how charming or familiar they may be, you were never meant to live in chains. 5. You confuse intensity with intimacy. In relationships that burn hot and fast, it's easy to mistake emotional intensity for deep connection. The butterflies, the drama, the passionate arguments followed by passionate reconciliations, it all feels meaningful. But intensity is not the same as intimacy. Stoic wisdom helps us see through this illusion. Epictetus reminds us that the wise person doesn't get tossed around by passion like a ship in a storm. Yet, in the wrong relationship, we become addicted to the storm. We start to believe that real love is supposed to feel like chaos, that the ups and downs mean we care deeply. But often, they just mean we're caught in a cycle of emotional dependency and trauma bonding. True intimacy is not chaotic. It's consistent. It's quiet in its strength. It builds, slowly and honestly, through trust, vulnerability, and shared values, not adrenaline. When someone shows you love only in extremes, either with grand gestures or total withdrawal, they're not connecting with you, they're controlling the emotional climate. If love always feels like a high-speed chase or a battlefield, it's not love. It's survival. The Stoics taught us to value calm, moderation, and virtue, not the thrill of losing ourselves in someone else. Ask yourself, do I feel seen or just emotionally overwhelmed? Am I opening up or just reacting? Love isn't meant to be a fire that consumes you. It's meant to be a light that guides both of you forward without burning you alive. 6. You fear being alone more than being unhappy. One of the more painful red flags, often invisible to us until much later, is when we choose to stay not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of loneliness. Fear of starting over. Fear of the unknown. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not fitting for the mind to be thus distracted." Yet when we're in the wrong relationship, we do exactly that. We waste our days hoping they'll change, fearing that no one else will love us, or imagining how unbearable being alone might be. This fear keeps us tethered to the wrong person. It's the voice that says, "Better the devil you know." But the Stoics would disagree. They taught that solitude is not a curse, it's a return to self. To your own mind, your own path, your own peace. If staying with someone feels safer than walking away, even though you're unhappy, you're not in a relationship. You're in an emotional holding cell. We often settle because we believe that love is scarce. But what's truly scarce is self-respect when fear is in charge. You can't build a strong foundation with someone if the ground you're standing on is shaky with self-doubt. Sometimes, choosing solitude is the first act of real love, love for yourself. Chapter 7. You're always the one doing the emotional labor. Emotional labor is the invisible work of maintaining the relationship, initiating conversations, resolving conflicts, making compromises, managing their moods, remembering what matters. If you're always the one doing this work, you're not in a partnership. You're in a one-sided contract. Stoicism values equanimity, a balance of emotional response and reason. A healthy relationship reflects that balance. But when you're constantly regulating your partner's emotions while suppressing your own, you begin to lose the essence of who you are. Do you find yourself apologizing to keep the peace, even when you've done nothing wrong? Do you clean up after their emotional messes while your needs go ignored? Do they check out during hard conversations while you work overtime trying to fix things? This isn't strength, it's silent suffering. And Stoic philosophy doesn't glorify martyrdom. It encourages clarity. The clarity to see when something is unjust and the courage to walk away from it. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You can't control how they respond, but you can stop carrying what they refuse to hold. A real relationship feels shared, not like a job you do alone in the dark. 8. Your intuition keeps whispering something isn't right. Stoics believed in aligning with nature, and part of our nature is our inner voice. Call it intuition, conscience, or gut feeling. It often knows long before the mind is ready to admit it. When you're in love with the wrong person, this inner voice whispers constantly, "This doesn't feel right. I'm not myself anymore. I shouldn't have to work this hard just to be loved." But we ignore it. We rationalize. We drown it out with distractions, advice from others, or our own hopes that things will change. Stoic practice is the art of listening inward, of simplifying our thoughts until the truth becomes clear. The wrong relationship makes you doubt that truth. It makes you second-guess your instincts. But ignoring your intuition is like silencing a compass. Soon, you're lost. And when you're always trying to convince yourself that things are okay, you're using your mind to betray your soul. The Stoics didn't chase external validation. They pursued alignment between thought, action, and feeling. When you're in the wrong relationship, these three are constantly at war. Listen to the whisper. It's not fear. It's not overthinking. It's wisdom. 9. When communication always feels like conflict. Healthy communication builds bridges. In the wrong relationship, it builds battlefields. If every conversation feels like a potential argument, if even basic topics turn into debates, shutdowns, or passive-aggressive exchanges, it's not a communication issue. It's a compatibility issue. The Stoics believed in measured speech and inner calm. Epictetus advised us to listen more, speak little, and always with consideration. But how can you do that when you're met with defensiveness, sarcasm, or outright disrespect? Do you feel like you can't be honest without triggering a fight? Do you feel like you're constantly editing your words to avoid setting them off? Or worse, do they use your honesty against you later, as ammunition? That is not communication. That is survival mode. In a healthy bond, honesty is safe, not dangerous. You shouldn't need a strategy to talk to someone who loves you. If the way they respond makes you regret opening up, your relationship is a minefield, not a partnership. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." If they claim to love you, but punish you for being vulnerable, they are not being one. Good communication doesn't mean agreeing on everything. It means you're able to disagree without fear. And if that's missing, so is the foundation of real connection. 10. When you've lost the joy in simple things. Love, when it's right, doesn't take away your joy, it enhances it. But in the wrong relationship, even the small things begin to lose their color. You stop laughing as much. Your hobbies feel distant. Time alone doesn't refresh you, it just reminds you of what's missing. You start to feel like you're carrying a quiet sadness that no one sees. Stoicism teaches us to find joy in simplicity, in the present moment, in nature, in the self. But when you're emotionally entangled with someone who's wrong for you, joy is replaced by anticipation of the next argument, the next cold shoulder, the next letdown. You become emotionally tethered to their behavior. If they're happy, you can breathe. If they're distant, you spiral. If they're kind, you're relieved, but it never lasts. This is not peace. It's performance. And slowly, you lose touch with the simple pleasures that used to ground you. Seneca said, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." But with the wrong person, the present is often bleak, and the future always feels like a negotiation. You deserve a life where joy isn't rare, where you don't need to explain why your heart feels heavy, where peace isn't a reward, but the rhythm of your days. 11. When you can't imagine a future that includes them. You may love them today, but can you see them tomorrow? Can you picture them beside you in 5 years? In 10? Can you honestly imagine building a life with them, or does the idea fill you with hesitation? The Stoics believed that a good life is lived with purpose, and purpose requires direction. But in the wrong relationship, the future becomes vague. You avoid long-term conversations. You feel uncertainty every time someone mentions marriage, commitment, or building something meaningful. You might love their presence, but the future feels like a fog. And here's the hardest part: you blame yourself for that doubt. You wonder if you're afraid of commitment or asking for too much. But often, it's not you. It's that your soul knows this isn't the right fit even if your heart hasn't caught up yet. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look. If your inner voice hesitates every time you think about forever with them, don't ignore that pause. Forever isn't built on maybe. 12. When you're more in love with their potential than their reality. This may be the most common and most tragic red flag of all. You're not in love with who they are. You're in love with who they could be. You believe in their best self. You see glimpses of it, kindness, depth, passion, but it never stays. You hold on to those brief moments like lifelines, believing they mean more than the reality you see every day. Stoic wisdom teaches us to see clearly, not as we wish things were, but as they truly are. Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." If you already believe this person will get better, you stop questioning whether they want to. Potential is a beautiful thing, but you cannot build a relationship on it. You cannot heal someone who doesn't want to grow. You cannot wait forever for someone to become the person you deserve. Meanwhile, life is passing by. You keep shrinking, hoping they'll grow. You stay patient, hoping they'll change. You trade the present for a future that may never come. Reality is the only thing you can live with. And the Stoics remind us, peace is found in acceptance. Love who they are, or leave who they aren't. 13. When your friends and family see what you don't. Sometimes, the people around us notice what we're too close, or too emotionally invested, to see. Your friends seem quieter lately. Your family seems hesitant around your partner. Their comments are subtle, but their concern is real. The Stoics taught us to listen with reason, not ego. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change." But when we're in love with the wrong person, even helpful truth feels like betrayal. You defend them. You rationalize their behavior. You say things like, "You don't know them like I do," or "They've been through a lot." And maybe that's true. But ask yourself, why are you working so hard to convince everyone else this relationship is healthy? Why do you feel drained after trying to explain why you're staying? Your loved ones don't want perfection for you. They want peace. And when they consistently express worry, not once, but repeatedly, it may not be judgment. It may be love trying to reach you through the fog. Stoicism doesn't ask us to blindly follow others, but it warns us against arrogance. Sometimes, the eyes outside the relationship see more clearly than the heart inside it. 14. When you feel more alone in the relationship than when you're single. There is a loneliness that comes with being alone. But there's a deeper, quieter, more painful loneliness that comes from being unseen in someone else's presence. In the wrong relationship, you share space, but not connection. You talk, but feel unheard. You reach, but are never truly held. The Stoics never glorified relationships. They believed they should serve the soul's growth, not suffocate it. Epictetus taught, the key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. If you're lying next to someone yet feeling emotionally abandoned, that's not companionship. That's solitude with a shadow. You start censoring your pain. You tell yourself, it's just a phase, or maybe I'm being too sensitive. But you're not. You're just slowly realizing that being alone is less lonely than feeling alone next to the wrong person. You deserve to be deeply known. You deserve a love that doesn't disappear when things get hard. You deserve a presence that fills the silence, not one that deepens it. 15. When you're constantly waiting for things to get better. Hope is powerful. But hope can also be deceptive, especially when it becomes a delay tactic for walking away from something that's not improving. Stoicism teaches us not to place our happiness in future outcomes. Seneca said, "Life is long if you know how to use it." But when you're stuck in a cycle of waiting, your life becomes a loop of maybes, what ifs, and once they heal, things will get better. Once we move, things will be different. Once I fix myself, maybe they'll love me better. But what if nothing changes? The truth is, people show us who they are every day, not in grand gestures, but in repeated patterns. And when their love keeps you hoping more than healing, wishing more than living, you're not in a relationship. You're in emotional limbo. Stoicism reminds us, the present is all we ever truly have. And if the present is full of pain and promises, it may be time to stop waiting for better days, and start choosing them. 16. When you've forgotten what it feels like to be truly loved. This one is subtle. It creeps in over time. You've been in this relationship so long that you can't remember what it feels like to be fully accepted, fully heard, fully chosen. You've adjusted to the emotional hunger. You've normalized the silence. You've confused consistency with affection, obligation with love. But something inside you remembers. Your nervous system knows the difference between peace and performance. And deep down, you feel it, this love costs too much. It requires too much proving, too much sacrificing, too much endurance. Stoic wisdom doesn't dwell on sentimentality. But it does call us back to truth. And the truth is, real love doesn't feel like confusion. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't punish you for needing reassurance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And in the wrong relationship, your thoughts are no longer your own. They revolve entirely around whether you're enough. You are. You always have been. You've just been loving someone who made you forget. 17. When you're constantly apologizing for who you are. Love isn't supposed to shrink you. But in the wrong relationship, that's exactly what happens. You start muting parts of yourself, your humor, your opinions, your passions, because they seem to bother the other person. You find yourself apologizing constantly. Not for mistakes, but for existing in a way they don't like. Stoicism teaches self-respect. It reminds us that we are born whole, not broken. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." But how can you do that if you're always editing who you are to keep the peace? Here's the truth. If someone makes you feel like too much, they are not enough. You should never feel guilty for being expressive, emotional, ambitious, or sensitive. You shouldn't have to ask permission to be yourself. You shouldn't have to apologize for the very things that make you, you. The wrong person will make you question your identity. The right person will protect it. If you've been walking on eggshells for so long you've forgotten what solid ground feels like, pay attention. That's not love. That's self-erasure. 18. When you're always justifying their behavior to others. When you're in love with the wrong person, you become their defense attorney. You're constantly explaining them away. They are just going through a tough time. They didn't mean it like that. You don't understand. They're not usually like this. And sometimes, that's true. People are layered. Life is complex. But if you always have to translate their behavior so others won't judge them, ask yourself, why? Stoicism values truth over illusion. Seneca wrote, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." But when you're constantly covering for someone else, your own mind becomes conquered by excuses, by doubt, by silence. You become so busy managing how the world sees them that you forget how they treat you. You spend more time explaining their pain than expressing your own. You become their public relations department while they do nothing to repair the damage in private. Healthy relationships don't require PR. They speak for themselves. The people who love you shouldn't be confused by your pain. And you shouldn't have to work this hard just to make dysfunction seem normal. 19. When you start to feel responsible for their healing. It often starts with empathy. You love them. You see their pain. You want to help. And so, you take on the role of the caretaker, the therapist, the fixer. You say to yourself, they just need support. You start carrying their trauma. You excuse their coldness because of their past. You endure their anger because of what they've been through. But Stoicism teaches personal responsibility. Epictetus said, "You may bind up a broken leg, but you cannot make the bone knit." No matter how much you love someone, you cannot do their healing for them. You cannot fix a person who doesn't want to be fixed. If they're using their past to justify present harm, that's not growth. That's avoidance. And if your love requires constant emotional labor just to keep them stable, you've become their anchor, not their equal. Healing is a beautiful journey, but it must be chosen. If you feel more like a nurse than a partner, that's a red flag, not a love story. 20. When you're afraid to imagine life without them, but you're not happy with them. This is where many people get stuck. You know you're unhappy. You know something is missing. But the thought of leaving is terrifying. So you stay. Not because it's good, but because it's familiar. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. But fear clouds that strength. It tells you that life without them will be worse. That you'll never find someone else. That starting over means failure. But staying unhappy isn't success. It's self-abandonment. When you fear being without someone more than you value being at peace, you're not in love. You're in dependency. And no matter how deep the history, the truth remains. If love is making you miserable, it's not love anymore. It's memory. It's fear. It's habit. You can love someone and still outgrow them. You can appreciate who they were without denying who they are now. And you can walk away, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself, too. 21. When they use your insecurities against you. In healthy love, your vulnerabilities are safe. In toxic love, your vulnerabilities become weapons. Maybe you opened up about your childhood. Maybe you revealed your fears, your traumas, the parts of yourself that still ache. And at first, they seemed to listen. Maybe even comfort you. But over time, they began to use those things against you. In arguments. In subtle jokes. In moments when you were already weak. This is not just hurtful. It's betrayal. And the Stoics did not tolerate betrayal of the soul. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." When someone weaponizes your wounds, you are wasting your life trying to heal in a place that keeps re-injuring you. You should never have to defend your pain to the person you trusted it with. Real love holds your fears like sacred truths. The wrong person twists them into tools of control. If you're in a relationship where your honesty is turned into ammunition, it's not just emotionally unsafe, it's soul-corrupting. And no amount of history justifies staying in harm's way. Chapter 22. When you've lost trust and can't get it back. Trust is the foundation of all connection. Without it, love becomes a negotiation. You watch their actions closely. You replay old conversations. You doubt your intuition. You feel like a detective in your own relationship, searching for proof that you're not crazy. But Stoicism teaches that distrust is a form of inner chaos. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And when trust is gone, your thoughts become clouded with suspicion, hyper-awareness, and anxiety. Maybe they lied once. Maybe they betrayed you emotionally. Maybe they gaslighted you when you confronted them. Whatever the reason, the fracture is there, and it hasn't healed. You tell yourself, "I should forgive. I should move on." But forgiveness and trust are not the same. You can forgive someone and still not feel safe with them anymore. You can love someone and still not trust them again. When love requires you to silence your instincts, that's not strength. That's self-abandonment. If rebuilding trust feels impossible, listen to that. It may not mean you're weak, it may mean you're finally seeing things clearly. Chapter 23. When you feel more anxious than safe. Love is not meant to be a constant adrenaline rush. It's meant to be an anchor. But in the wrong relationship, your nervous system is always on high alert. You wake up anxious. You check your phone, not out of excitement, but dread. You analyze their tone, their silences, their emojis. You rehearse conversations in your head before having them, because you never know how they'll react. This isn't romantic. This isn't passion. This is emotional survival. And the Stoics would call this out for what it is: enslavement to external conditions. Epictetus taught that freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. But in this kind of love, your peace depends entirely on their moods, their choices, their approval. You've become tethered to their unpredictability. Here's the truth. You should feel calmer with them, not more chaotic. You should feel more seen, not more scrutinized. And if your body feels more safe when they leave the room than when they enter it, something's deeply wrong. Love shouldn't feel like walking through a minefield. It should feel like coming home. 24. When love starts to feel like a transaction. At first, everything felt effortless. Affection was freely given. Time was shared. Kindness flowed. But now, it all feels conditional. You give and wait. You ask and feel guilty. You keep score, not because you want to, but because they do. I did this for you, so why didn't you? If you really cared, you would have. You owe me this. This is not love. This is debt. The Stoics believed that the highest form of virtue was doing good without expectation. Seneca said, "He who gives promptly, gives twice." But in a transactional relationship, love is never a gift. It's a currency. And you're always paying. You begin to feel that your worth is measured by what you offer, not who you are. You feel exhausted. Not from loving, but from proving, earning, performing. Real love is not a ledger. You do not owe someone your soul in exchange for temporary affection. You do not have to keep buying love with your silence, your time, your self-respect. In the wrong relationship, the emotional bill always comes due. In the right one, love is abundant and free. 25. When you stay because of history, not harmony. Time is a powerful glue. You've shared years, memories, holidays, heartbreaks. You've built a life together, or at least the appearance of one. And because of all that, you stay. Not because things are good now, but because they were once. You scroll through old pictures and feel warmth, but also grief. Because the version of the relationship that still lives in your mind no longer exists. You're clinging to the ghost of what once was, hoping it will resurrect itself if you just hold on a little longer. But Stoicism teaches presence, not nostalgia. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Forget everything else. Keep hold of this alone, the present. Recognize it for what it is. Ask yourself, what is this relationship today? Not last year, not when it started, but now. Are you being loved, or just remembered? Are you growing together, or just surviving together? History matters. But harmony matters more. Because history alone won't bring peace. And a shared past doesn't guarantee a shared future. Staying for the memories only creates more regret. 26. When you feel like you're always the one trying. You send the texts. You plan the time together. You apologize first. You compromise the most. And slowly, without even realizing it, the relationship becomes one-sided. It's not obvious at first, it creeps in. You tell yourself you're just the more caring one. You chalk it up to differences in personality. But over time, resentment grows. You start to wonder, if I stopped trying, would anything between us even exist? The Stoics prized reciprocity in all human interaction. Seneca said, "Love cannot exist unless it is mutual. One-sided effort is not noble, it's exhausting. And pretending it doesn't hurt to carry the emotional weight alone only leads to burnout. You were never meant to be both the giver and the receiver, both the fixer and the forgiver. Love is not maintained by effort alone. It's maintained by two people choosing each other again and again. And if you're the only one choosing, then the relationship has already ended. You're just the last to admit it. 27. When love becomes a tug-of-war, not a team. Healthy love feels like a team, two people facing life together. Toxic love feels like a tug-of-war, two people trying to pull each other into submission. You fight not to understand, but to win. You speak not to share, but to defend. Even silence becomes a weapon. Every disagreement becomes a battlefield. And slowly, the person who once felt like a partner now feels like an opponent. The Stoics understood conflict, but they also valued unity. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." But when you're constantly pulled into power struggles, you lose your center. You start matching their energy. You harden. You become reactive, defensive, drained. You stop solving problems together. You start becoming the problem to each other. This isn't love, it's emotional war. A good relationship doesn't require perfect harmony, but it does require mutual purpose, a shared direction, a sense that you're on the same side, even when things get hard. If love feels like a contest, you've already lost what matters most, peace. 28. When you're more afraid of change than you are of pain. We don't always stay because we're happy. We often stay because we're afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of starting over. Afraid that leaving means we've failed. But Stoicism calls this out directly. Epictetus said, "People are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them." Your fear of change is not about the reality of life without them. It's about the story you've told yourself. That you won't find someone else. That you'll regret leaving. That pain is better than the unknown. But ask yourself honestly, are you still in this relationship because of love or because of fear? Is this comfort or just a cage you've decorated over time? Real growth begins the moment you stop running from discomfort. You don't have to know what the next chapter holds. You just have to stop rereading the same painful one over and over. You deserve more than survival. You deserve clarity. And you deserve a love that doesn't depend on fear to keep you close. 29. When you're lonely, even when you're together. There's a kind of loneliness that only shows up when you're sitting next to someone who no longer truly sees you. They're in the room, but they're not with you. You talk, but they don't really hear you. You touch, but it feels hollow. Mechanical. You could be in the same house, same bed, same life. But emotionally, you're in two completely different worlds. And yet, we stay. Because it feels safer than physical solitude. But the Stoics would say otherwise. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Being alone isn't what breaks us. Feeling alone while entangled with someone else is what truly wears us down. If love feels like emotional exile, if the person you're with makes you feel more invisible than seen, then you're not in a relationship. You're in an illusion of one. Connection isn't about proximity. It's about presence. And if your heart has started to whisper, "I miss myself," it's time to listen. 30. When you have to diminish your dreams to keep the peace. In the right relationship, your dreams are fuel. In the wrong one, they are threats. You mention a goal, and they mock it. You talk about a new opportunity, and they change the subject. You express ambition, and suddenly you're too much, too busy, too different. Over time, you shrink. Not because you want to, but because it's the only way to stay close to someone who fears your growth. The Stoics believed in living according to one's nature. Seneca said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." But in a relationship with the wrong person, you stop learning. You stop reaching. You start settling. You compromise, not just on choices, but on identity. You learn to dim your light so they don't feel small. You confuse love with loyalty, to your own stagnation. But here's the truth. You cannot become who you were meant to be while constantly editing yourself for someone else's comfort. Love should never require you to abandon your calling. And if the cost of the relationship is your future, you're paying too much. 31. When they keep you guessing, on purpose. Some people mistake confusion for chemistry. They confuse emotional inconsistency with depth. And they keep you hooked, not through love, but through unpredictability. One day, they are warm. The next, they are distant. Then they apologize. Then they disappear. Then they say they love you. Then they go silent again. And because you crave connection, you start chasing the high of those good moments, convincing yourself they mean something lasting. But Stoicism cuts through this emotional fog. Epictetus said, "When someone is properly grounded in life, they shouldn't have to look outside themselves for approval." Yet here you are, checking your phone like it holds your worth. Waiting for crumbs of affection. Hoping the version of them you love will stay long enough to make it real. This isn't love. This is emotional gambling. And the house always wins. The right person won't keep you guessing. They'll show up the same way, on the good days and the hard ones. And you'll never have to wonder if you're loved. Because real love is consistent. And clarity is the most underrated form of peace. 32. When you know you're not yourself anymore. You used to laugh more. You used to speak freely. You used to feel grounded, like you had a center, a spine, a light. But somewhere along the way, that version of you began to fade. Not all at once. Slowly. Almost invisibly. Until one day, you look in the mirror. And you don't recognize the person staring back. You've become quieter. Less sure. Less vibrant. Not because of life's challenges, but because of the way this relationship has eroded your essence. The Stoics taught self-ownership. Marcus Aurelius reminded us. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. So what happens when your thoughts are no longer your own? When every decision is filtered through their reactions? When your identity becomes a reaction to their moods? You are not meant to disappear inside someone else. Love is not self-loss, it's self-expansion. And if you've had to silence your soul just to keep things calm, then what you're protecting isn't love. It's fear. Come back to yourself. You were never meant to vanish in order to be loved. 33. When you're always apologizing for your feelings. A relationship should be a space where your emotions are safe to land, not a courtroom where you're constantly defending them. But with the wrong person, your sadness becomes an inconvenience. Your boundaries are too sensitive. Your concerns are dramatic. Your reactions are too much. So what do? You begin shrinking, editing, questioning yourself before you speak. You learn to preface everything with, "I know this sounds silly, but..." You apologize for being human. And slowly, your emotional life becomes something you hide, even from the person who's supposed to understand you best. The Stoics believed in emotional regulation, but not emotional suppression. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." When your feelings are constantly invalidated, your estimate of yourself starts to erode. You begin to believe that your emotions are a burden. That your heart is wrong. That maybe, if you were just better, things would be easier. But you're not wrong for feeling. You're not broken for needing clarity. And love should never require you to apologize for your truth. 34. When you're more focused on fixing them than loving yourself. There's a dangerous kind of love, the kind that makes you a caretaker of someone else's dysfunction, while your own needs sit unattended in the dark. You become the therapist, the parent, the peacekeeper. You carry their pain like it's your own. You justify their outbursts as trauma responses. You convince yourself that if you just love them better, deeper, harder, they'll finally heal. But while you're tending to their wounds, yours are bleeding too. And no one's reaching for the bandages. The Stoics warned us, never sacrifice your virtue for another's vice. Seneca wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence. But in this dynamic, silence becomes your self-defense. Because speaking up gets labeled as selfish. Because love starts to look like self-abandonment. The truth is, You cannot save someone who is committed to their own chaos. And if the relationship has turned into a project more than a partnership, then you're not in love. You're in survival mode, trying to rescue someone who doesn't want to be rescued. 35. When you're afraid of their reactions. You flinch before speaking. You overthink your texts. You practice your tone before bringing up anything remotely sensitive. Not because you're insecure, but because you know what they're capable of when they're upset. Maybe it's not physical, but emotional volatility is its own kind of violence. Yelling, stonewalling, name-calling, passive aggression, withholding affection, making you feel like the villain for simply having needs. And so you adapt. You suppress your truth to keep the peace. You walk on eggshells and call it love. But the Stoics knew, living in fear is not living at all. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life." If you're not free to express yourself, if you have to calculate every sentence like it's a landmine, if your nervous system is in a constant state of defense, that's not a relationship. That's captivity dressed in intimacy. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be safe. And any love that threatens your peace isn't love. It's control. 36. When you realize you're settling for potential, not reality. We fall in love with flashes, glimpses of who they could be, the way they once showed up, the rare moments they were fully present, the dreams they talk about, even if they never act on them, the person they promise to become someday. So we hold on, not to what is, but what could be. We wait. We work. We hope. But potential is a powerful illusion. It tricks you into giving your time to someone who isn't giving their growth. And in doing so, you sacrifice your own. The Stoics demanded a focus on what is, not what might be. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Objective judgment, now, at this very moment. Not later. Not tomorrow. Not in some future version of this love story that may never arrive. What is this relationship, right now? Are they showing up? Are they growing with you? Or are you writing their character arc in your imagination while they stay the same? Don't confuse hope with evidence. Don't confuse effort with progress. And don't confuse potential with love. Because one is a dream. The other is your reality." 37. When the relationship costs you your peace. There are many things you can give up for love. But peace shouldn't be one of them. You tell yourself it's just a phase. That all relationships have conflict. That stress is normal. That maybe you're the problem. But deep down, you know, you haven't felt calm in months. Maybe years. You flinch when your phone lights up. You dread conversations instead of looking forward to them. You go to bed anxious and wake up with knots in your stomach. And somehow, it's become normal to live in emotional turbulence. But the Stoics didn't see peace as a luxury. They saw it as the essence of a well-lived life. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free, and he who is free is at peace." When love costs you your ability to breathe deeply, think clearly, sleep peacefully, it's no longer love. It's a negotiation with your own nervous system. Love is not supposed to feel like war. And if the calm only comes when they're not around, then you already know. Your peace is trying to tell you what your heart is afraid to admit. 38. When the relationship makes you lose respect for yourself. There comes a quiet moment in every unhealthy relationship. When you look at yourself in the mirror and ask, "Who have I become?" Not because you've changed in a good way, but because you've tolerated what you once said you never would. You said you wouldn't accept dishonesty. You said you wouldn't beg for love. You said you'd leave if it ever made you feel small. But now, you're doing all those things, just to hold on to something that's slipping through your fingers anyway. The Stoics taught us to guard our integrity as fiercely as our life. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And you can't be your own master when you're constantly betraying your values to keep someone else close. The relationship didn't just take your time. It took your self-respect. And if loving them means losing the parts of yourself you once stood proudly on, then the cost is already too high. Come home to yourself. That's where the real love starts. 39. When love feels conditional and you're always performing. You've started to notice. There's a version of you that shows up when they're around. Filtered. Measured. Safe. You laugh when you don't feel like it. You agree when you want to speak up. You shapeshift to avoid conflict, or worse, rejection. It's not just exhausting. It's unsustainable. Because deep down, you know, their love only flows when you're easy to handle. When you don't push back. When you don't need too much. And so you become a performer, in your own life. Faking ease to avoid abandonment. But the Stoics warned us never to tie our worth to external validation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. Conditional love makes you abandon yourself in pieces. And slowly, you forget what it's like to be real, raw, imperfect, fully seen. You were never meant to earn love through performance. You were meant to be loved as you are, not as a version they've edited for their own comfort. And if you have to perform to be loved, then you're not being loved. You're being managed." 40. When letting go feels like grief, but staying feels like dying. Letting go doesn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels like death. Like the end of a dream. Like losing a future you swore was real. You grieve not just the person, but the version of you who believed in the love. You grieve the laughter, the promises, the plans. You grieve the investment of time, emotion, hope. But what if staying is no longer life either? You're not growing. You're not resting. You're not being met. You're surviving. Day to day. Heartbeat to heartbeat. And the Stoics would ask, what is truly in your control? Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not. You cannot control how they love. You cannot force someone to meet you. But you can choose to stop bleeding in a place that only offers bandages when it's convenient." Yes, letting go hurts. But staying in something that slowly kills your soul, that's not living. That's quiet surrender to the wrong life. Choose the pain that leads to healing. Not the pain that just repeats itself. 41. When you mistake intensity for intimacy. Some relationships start with fire, passion, urgency, chemistry that feels like gravity. It's exciting. Addictive. The highs are euphoric. But over time, you start to notice. The intensity isn't just romantic. It's volatile. Fights that erupt out of nowhere. Apologies soaked in desperation. Makeups that feel like relief from war, not love. You tell yourself this means you're meant to be. That it's just a complicated love. But it's not love. It's emotional whiplash. Stoic wisdom reminds us, the nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. Intensity is not proof of connection. It's often the byproduct of insecurity, codependence, or chaos. Real intimacy is quiet. It's stable. It's present. It doesn't need theatrics to prove its existence. Don't confuse the sparks of drama with the light of love. One burns you. The other warms you. 42. When you feel guilty for putting yourself first. You finally say no. You finally take space. You finally ask for something you need. And suddenly, they withdraw. They act cold. Distant. Dismissive. You're made to feel like you've committed a crime, all because you chose yourself. And now, instead of feeling empowered, you feel selfish. Ashamed. Like maybe you should have just stayed quiet. This is not love. This is manipulation in disguise. The Stoics held self-governance as sacred. Seneca wrote, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." You cannot live unconquered if your basic needs are treated like betrayals. You cannot love someone who only respects your boundaries when they benefit them. True love celebrates your wholeness. It doesn't punish your autonomy. If choosing yourself feels like abandonment to them, they were never really choosing you in the first place. 43. when their words say one thing, but their actions say another. They say they care. They say they're trying. They say you matter. But what do? They forget promises. They dismiss your pain. They show up late emotionally and physically over and over again. You hold on to the words because they sound beautiful. You repeat them in your head, trying to reconcile them with reality. But as Stoicism teaches, don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. Even Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Love is a verb. If they love you, it will be visible. In their effort. In their consistency. In the way they make you feel safe without needing to ask for it. Empty promises are emotional currency for the emotionally unavailable. And if their actions betray their words, believe the behavior, not the story. 44. When you realize you're the only one fighting for it. You initiate the conversations. You bring up the problems. You apologize first. You try, again and again, to make things work. But they float. Detached. Passive. Maybe even indifferent. You're doing CPR on something they're watching die. And worst of all, you've started blaming yourself. Thinking maybe if you were just easier to love, they'd show up differently. But one-sided effort is not love. It's exhaustion masquerading as commitment. The Stoics prized equanimity, the balance between effort and surrender. Epictetus wrote, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. You are only responsible for your half of the bridge. And if they're not walking toward you, you're not in a relationship, you're in a rescue mission. You deserve someone who meets you in the middle, not someone who makes you carry the whole thing. Let go of the fantasy, and let the silence from their side speak louder than any 'I love you' they've ever whispered." 45. When you finally choose yourself. At first, it won't feel like freedom. It'll feel like failure. Walking away from a love you poured everything into. It stings. You'll question if you gave up too soon. If maybe, just maybe, you could have done more. But the truth is, you did. You stayed longer than you should have. You fought for both of you. You carried conversations, covered wounds, and convinced yourself it was just a rough patch, even when the patch became the pattern. And now? You're tired. Not just physically but soul-deep tired. Because you've been betraying yourself for love. That ends now. Because choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's a return to inner alignment. It's the moment you stop begging for crumbs and remember you were born whole. The Stoics knew this moment well. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When your thoughts are soaked in survival, in trying to earn love, your soul dims. But when you begin thinking like someone who is worthy, loved, respected, whole, you start making decisions that honor that worth. You no longer chase closure from someone who never gave you clarity. You no longer shrink to stay small enough to fit inside their comfort zone. You no longer confuse pain with passion. You walk away, not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving you. Emotional outro. So, if you find yourself in a relationship where you're always anxious, you're always apologizing, you're always wondering if you're asking for too much, that's not love. That's emotional erosion. Real love holds you steady, not hostage. It expands you, softens you. It makes you feel more you, not less. Letting go won't be easy. There will be days when your heart still reaches for them out of habit, not hope. But you'll keep walking, step by step, breath by breath. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you no longer miss the person. You miss the version of you that thought love meant staying, no matter what. And that is when you'll know you're finally free. The pain won't have been a punishment. It will have been a teacher. A brutal one, but one that handed you back to yourself. Whole, wiser, unshakable.